inequality has clearly come down. So if you want to judge globalization, you must judge it not in terms of whether inequality went up or down in individual countries, but what happened between countries, with China catching up with the West and we growing much faster than the rest of the world. Inequality for the world as a whole has actually diminished because of globalization. This story of inequality rising because of the Piketty type stories is actually a very, very disingenuous one, because this is an easy thing to use to justify protectionism in rich countries and build a narrative of victimhood, which can then be used, ironically, against the poorer countries in the world, which actually need to grow faster. So I think that story has to be countered, that globalization is a good thing. Now, true, we need to take account of the localized impacts of this, and we cannot simply brush them under the carpet. And by the way, this is also true not just in the Midwest in America, this is also true here in India. So we need to take that, we need to think about transition time, we need to invest into what needs to be done in order to take along these populations along, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The point is that globalization over the last half a century or so has been a good thing, and a good thing for humanity as a whole. So that's the first point. Now, come to your second point. How do we then engage with this going forward? And that actually is a very, very tricky thing. It's much trickier than people think. You asked a question that goes to the nub of something very complicated, which is this. There are extraordinary technological changes happening, whether it is artificial intelligence, or new forms of manufacturing, or all kinds of things, new energy sources and so on. And we are at the cusp at where there's going to be enormous rapid change. The problem is we have nobody in the world has any idea what this is going to lead to. And let me tell you, this is nothing new. In 1898, the world's first urban conference was held. And the main discussion in that urban conference in New York was horse manure. And everybody was discussing about how London would be under 5 feet of horse manure if nothing was done. And every discussion was all about horse manure. But within 15 years, horses just disappeared from the streets of all the major cities in the world. So let no consultant, no matter how clever the presentation, convince you that they know where this is going. We don't. The question is, how do we adjust for what is very rapidly going to happen to all of us, and how do we prepare for this? So this is a very tricky thing, and in the end, as I keep arguing, the most important thing is not our great ability to predict what the changes that will happen as a result of these technologies, which we actually have not.
Okay, there you have it. That is Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor there, talking about the overall trend for the globalized system of trading. Currently, he believes that there is a complicated system in place, but there will be another round of globalization on the anvil. That's an exclusive conversation on ET Now. But let's shift gears right back to the markets. 10,365, Siddharth, and we were talking about some top recommendations.
Well, yes, now 61 points down, and I can see ICICI Bank, Bajaj Auto and Reliance Industry trading at lowest point of the day. So that clearly suggests or signifies from where the selling pressure is coming into the market. 65 points down on Nifty, 22 points down on Bank Nifty, and clearly Manas has been on the right side of the trend most part of Feb and March. Manas, all three sell calls. PFC is a sell. ICICI Bank, I'm not seeing any major volumes over there today, but nevertheless stock is down by 2%, and L&T Housing Finance, that stock has been in a range. You think there would be a breakdown?
Siddharth, in PFC and REC, both the stocks are making lower tops and lower bottoms. Yes, we have seen some recovery yesterday, but it is not sustaining on high levels. I think on every rise, one can go short in PFC and REC. PFC, if you are going short at current levels, then keep the stop loss below above 89 rupees 50 paisa. And you can set the target of around 82 rupees. ICICI Bank is has a weak structure because stock is making lower tops and lower bottoms. We have seen some recovery, but it could not sustain above 200-day moving average. Today, it has already broken the support of 300 rupees. So I think here you can set the target of around 290. keep your stop loss above 303. And last one is the sell call on L&T Finance Holding. The reasons are almost same. It is not sustaining on high levels above its 200-day moving average, and today it has broken the support of 162 on the intraday chart. So I think here you can see more downside. It can again test its recent low, that is 155. Stop loss should be 164.
Well, ICICI Bank is an important stock not just for Bank Nifty but also for Nifty, and if that is under pressure, you would sense that market may not show substantial recovery till the time this stock doesn't change its trend. Also, just a point on PFC and REC. Jefferies has come out with a note in which it has downgraded both the names. In fact, last week there was an RBI dictate that you will have to well, before I comment on that PFC and REC, let's go back to Supriya. She has more content from that conference which is going on.
And all that kind of things. I'm not going to take you through all of that. The fact of the matter is that for a variety of reasons, 2017 was picked as the year in which to carry out a very large number of possibly painful reforms. And in some ways, demonetization shouldn't just be seen as an attempt to take out the black money in cash. Everybody knows that the cash part of black money is a very small part of the black economy. There's many other ways in which, including real estate and so on, what really the demonetization really does is a signal of a regime shift. I think that is the much more important thing to understand about demonetization. Demonetization was an attempt to clearly signal a break from the past. And so that is what demonetization is. And since then, if you see, large number of other measures were put in place which changes the framework of reference of how our social economy, the society and political economy functions. You saw, for example, the banking system being cleaned up using the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. This was a deliberate attempt to break with the old style of evergreening. And you can now see what is going on as things are getting tightened in the banking system. All kinds of fishy things are popping out. All kinds of skeletons are popping out of it. So this is just one area. What is being done, painful as it may be, is putting an end to what our ancient text called Matsya Nyaya. Matsya Nyaya is the law of the fish, where the big fish eat the smaller fish, and the smaller fish eat the even smaller fish. This was a system, a political economy, based on patronage, rent-seeking, and perpetuation of the power of a small, tiny group of people. This is now being replaced with a new India, which believes in rule of law, which believes in entrepreneurship, social mobility, risk-taking, and so on. And in order to do that, we had to create frameworks of governance. So we didn't want, so when you say less government, more governance, it doesn't mean that you simply withdraw the government and the governance happens. No, you have to impose the frameworks of governance before you withdraw the government. And what are those frameworks that are being imposed? The first and obvious one that was introduced was the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, because we went from a system where we had socialism without entry, certainly without entry, without licenses, to a system of capitalism without exit. So we have now moved to a system where market-based system where you have creative destruction and exit is allowed. So that was one major framework. The other major framework that was put in place was GST. May not have worked beautifully well in the first instance, but we have kept fixing it. It sort of works now. In another six months, it'll work reasonably well. Another big framework was this entire jam trinity thing. So what we are doing is introducing frameworks. Going forward, there are some more frameworks that need to be fixed, and I will talk to them later, but basically, this is an attempt to create frameworks so that this patronage-based system where it didn't matter what the rules said, but who you knew, is being replaced with a system where rule of law is the main driving force.
So let me ask you this question. I think your sharpest critics will give the government its due when when you say we're trying to break away from what was in the past, I will not run the risk of this becoming a political debate. Thankfully, no politicians on the panel, so we'll have a saner discussion. But the reality is that, and you're right, we took some very bitter pills in 2017. It was the year of pain. When will all of those begin to show results? I'll talk about GST separately, but the cleanup act that has begun, let's just begin talking about the banks, the NPA crackdown. By when do you believe concrete results will be visible in the Indian economy?
Well, if you went back a year ago, we very well knew, even when Raghu was there, everybody knew that the banks were basically in real trouble. And we have had many episodes of cleaning up, by the way. In the 1990s also, by the way, we had a similar position. In fact, at that time, one could argue they were even worse than they are now. So this problem has perpetuated itself over time. And the solution that was being discussed maybe a year ago was, let's create a bad bank, stick all the bad loans in there, and recapitalize the banks and get them going. But what would that have done? It would have warehoused the old stuff, just like the old BIFR used to, and perpetuated them. Meanwhile, there would have been no culture change in the banks. The banks would have been recapitalized and they've gone back to doing what they were doing before. So instead, the bull was taken by its horns. We decided to use a brand new insolvency and bankruptcy code, which had never been tested, and to take the 50 largest cases, which by the way accounted for some 2/3 of the bad stuff, and to basically take them through the process. And of course, there is a process to it, which is now culminating as we speak. Many of the auctions, liquidations, resolutions, etc., will happen in the next 8 weeks, in fact. So let's see how that works out. Maybe not all of it will work out perfectly, but what will be done is at least some processes we will put in place. The old impunity is at least being challenged at some point, that there is maybe, and of course, by the way, it's not just the political system or the business class. We can clearly see major failures on the regulatory side, which are being showed up at multiple sides. So nobody is covering themselves in glory in all of this.
But you know, when you say the regulatory side, I must ask you two questions there. The whole idea is to clean up, and there are critics out there who say that the government is going with a very textbook sort of an approach. You know, a blanket ban on promoters, guarantors, related parties. Is that going to stall the system? We haven't really, we've not seen something like this before. Obviously, this is a new experiment that we're doing. But could the government have had a more nuanced approach than a blanket textbook sort of an approach? Because the risks that we run is the collateral damage. Bankers, off the record, tell you there could be a credit freeze altogether because we don't want to lend. You never know what we land up in.
So you're absolutely right. Well, I'll argue that it's not quite textbook, because we are in fact responding as it goes. In fact, we are criticized for changing the rules too often, in fact. But one of the reasons is we, in fact, are making a lot of major changes. And let's be very clear. We are in uncharted territories. So the best that can be done under these circumstances is to take feedback and respond, rather than take a rigid textbook approach.
That is the IMA National Leadership